Good afternoon. My name is Vikas Pota, and over the last few months, I've been having these conversations with friends of mine from all around the world. And it's so often that when I recount these stories and these tales and these experiences, those that I'm speaking to often say, "I wish I had the opportunity to hear in on that conversation or meet that particular person." So now technology allows us to do this, and I'm really interested in bringing together those that I've met and those that I've worked with over a period of time who have impressed me to come and offer their thoughts. We live in quite difficult times, and it's important to also showcase the experience of those from around the world in the education sector. So today I have with me my friend Arturo Kondo. Arturo, welcome. Hold on a second. Let me put you on. Arturo, welcome to this live stream. Arturo is in Costa Rica. It's a country that I've long been meaning to go to, and you've invited me so graciously so many times. But what Arturo does is he runs a fantastic university called Earth University, which is focused on fusing together agriculture and the latest leadership and management programs to make sure that our agri-economy in particular flourishes. Arturo, welcome to this live stream.
Thank you so much, because it's so good to be with you.
Fantastic. So I want to start off with asking you, just generally speaking, about Costa Rica, COVID, and your university and how it's dealing with the challenges that you've been facing. Do you want to start with commenting generally on COVID in your country?
Absolutely. So Costa Rica is a country that has had a universal healthcare now for 70 years plus, and that has helped a lot in the management of the pandemic. And the current government has been reasonable, followed science, and I think it's in general a good management. We had a great, I would say, first wave. We had less than 1,000 cases for a country of 5 million, less than 1,000 cases over the first 3 months. But then since then, we've had another 30,000 cases, right? I mean, so clearly the second wave, the loosening up of some restrictions led to an explosion, and as it has in many places. And so we're managing that second wave. The healthcare system hasn't collapsed, so that part of the equation has been well managed. And the other thing that is not completely explained is mortality, which is very low. It's very, very low, both in deaths per million people, but also the percentage of fatal cases of those reported, we are hovering around 1%, which is on the low end. So nobody knows why. And that leads me to what we have done in the context of what we are living in the country. We have students from all over Latin America and Africa who have not grown up in Costa Rica. I myself am not a Costa Rican. And so for all of us who came from other countries, we don't have those universal healthcare vaccination records, that broad-based vaccination methods of 40 plus years. And so we've been extra careful at the university. Most of our students are still on campus. A few left in March, going back to their countries in some cases. Some stayed in Costa Rica with their families or friends. And when we went virtual, so our first reaction was to go virtual. But for us, that's really counter. Not only counterintuitive, it's really counter our method, right? I mean, we spend less than a quarter of our time in the classroom. So it's been an adaptation to virtual, and now going back to the fields and to the labs over the past month or so.
Thanks a lot for that, Arturo. And it seems like your country is coping to some degree. I live in the UK, where we're just we are really challenged on all fronts. But tell me, Arturo, in terms of Earth University, and tell me what it does, because you don't come from a farming background or agriculture background. You're a management expert, a professor in leadership and business. So how do you bring someone like you to a university? Firstly, congratulations on the name, Earth University, and how do you become the president of Earth? Tell us a little about that story, please.
That absolutely, it's been a great step in my life, in my professional and personal career. So Earth University was founded to prepare leaders, and that makes a big difference. So it's not agronomic engineers, that's a degree, but that's not really the role they're going to play in the communities they will go back to. They do go back to. It is a leadership role. And so since the beginning, the university was set up as a cradle of entrepreneurs. first of all. So they for about a fifth of the program, they work on their own projects, and they start companies while they're here as a practice, but they do real companies. They have to sell real products and real services, and they are also prepared to be community leaders. And so in that combination, someone like me coming from the world of management, from the world of business, actually makes sense. When I was approached first, my first reaction was, I'm not an expert in agronomy. I'm not, and the person who approached me from the board said, the earth is so much more than agriculture or agronomy. And she was absolutely right. I knew of the university, but I didn't know enough. And I fell in love with the mission. I fell in love with the students. They are amazing leaders, young leaders from all walks of life. We have a very interesting representation of, 79% of our students have full scholarships, which is a financial challenge for the university, but make up for a very interesting student body, right? Something you don't see in universities around the world.
I mean, so when people talk about the future of universities, the normal reference points are the big Ivy League types in North America. When I think about universities and what you're doing, it's very innovative. Now, I've never had to think about farming, agriculture, that kind of thing. Tell us about some of these enterprises that you develop with your students from Earth University, and how do they span out over a period of time?
So there are two types of entrepreneurial experiences they have. Some are basic, if you will. I mean, sometimes they just set up a company to provide either to make ice cream or to provide the milk for the ice creams, and they just raise cattle or whatever. But they sometimes create more innovative ones. So, for instance, a company last year created an organic, natural insect repellent, right? I mean, and that requires more experimentation, more development. Some do, more marketing approaches to something like the repellent, or something like, hypoallergenic soap bars or things like that based on natural ingredients. And so the point is not so much that they grow up with a company, although that's great when it happens, but it's really that they develop this entrepreneurial mindset. They could end up working for a company, but the point is that within that, they will be innovators. And so it is really nice to see the things they come up with. A woman, an Ecuadorian woman 2 years ago, came up with a small app for a mobile phone just to help small firms measure their carbon footprint at a very low cost. And so what it had is, what they knew about, carbon footprint with a smaller, simpler questionnaire, etc., that doesn't cost thousands of dollars, but 100. So allowing a small company to really be part of climate change alleviation. And so, again, it is in their passion for change that they find these entrepreneurial projects to tackle.
And so most universities are now reckoning with the COVID, and the biggest concern is lecture theaters, tuition, that kind of thing. And tell me, in terms of for coming to Earth University in Costa Rica, what is the structure of a day for an undergraduate or postgraduate student?
So we are in the fields. So here our days start at 6:30.
No, and you literally mean you're in the fields?
Yeah, literally. Yeah, we're in the middle of the rainforest, halfway between the capital and the coast. And students have breakfast at 5:30, and they start classes at 6:30. This is the countryside. And what they spend is 75% of their time in their fields or in the labs, and about 20% of time in classrooms. They do have instruction, they do have theory, they do have. So that part is okay in a virtual mode. So in this kind of COVID, that will remain virtual for a while. But the part that is challenging is that experience in the field, because that part is learning by doing, not only experiential, but experimental learning. They try different things with different crops, with different methods, organic, non-organic, etc. And so losing that has been tough for the first few months. But as I say, about a month ago, we started going back to the fields with all the safety measures in place. And it's been, going back to our core and our essence. Now, the point of that learning is not only the development of skills, learning by doing, but it's also the development of the intellectual curiosity. You experiment. It's not only what you're taught, but what you learn from trying new things, and that's again built in the program since the beginning.
It's a phenomenal program by the sounds of it. Tell me, where did this uniqueness come from? Because I've never had to think about agriculture or a university like this. Are you unique in the world?
We are rare. We're rare, and we've had there's a university in Colombia that looks very much like ours, but it was very much modeled after Earth. I think the big difference came from first the mission. When the founders 30 plus years ago came together, they said we need to prepare leaders for the rural world in a time when conservation was not as mainstream as it is today. And so they said, it has to be sustainable development as we understand it now. It has to be entrepreneurial because jobs are scarce in rural areas, and it has to be leadership because there are not jobs to be had in rural areas of Latin America and Africa. It's really jobs to be created, but you need to change much more than just the company. So that mission went into a different direction for the program itself. And the other thing is that we are, because we're not part of a bigger university, we started from scratch. It's an agricultural program that has food processing, that has renewable energies training, that has a number of things, which in other places you get from taking courses in another school within your university, right? So in our case, we put together a number of things that would not be part of a single school, if you will, and by definition became more multidisciplinary in the process. And that's, I think, a big differentiating factor for us.
So I want to ask a question which is flashed up on here, which is, when we talk about the management of universities, a lot of people are obviously focusing on that at the moment. And you talked about, for example, you already had plans to be online and virtual, and COVID has accelerated that to the degree that now it is accepted. What are the things are happening or we're seeing today that you think will become permanent features in the way that, for example, your university functions?
Well, that's a great question. So the virtual part for sure, yes. And again, for us, it replaces or comes to support a smaller part of the in-person instruction in the classroom. But what we're finding is that it can also support the experiential part, right? So it's like a flight simulator. Nothing replaces flying a plane. But actually, there's a lot of value on flying a simulator first, right? And not only that, but recording you while you fly, so that you can go back in your experience and learn more from that one experience, because you don't have to recollect all, you have it on tape. So we are starting to use recordings of our students, I don't know, from milking a cow, to other type of experiences where now that goes back into the experiential learning, not just instruction. And so that virtual part will stay for sure. The other thing is that we are moving and experimenting with mobile-based instead of just laptop-based. And for us, that's particularly valuable because our students will be in the field. And our hope, we're looking forward to make that content available not only to students, but to farmers, just real farmers, right? Because they are not going to bring a laptop to the field necessarily. Probably they don't have one. But many do have a smartphone where they could have content that is useful for the work on their path. And that is one of the things I think that will stay and we should thrive with.
I mean, so I understand the point you make with regards to a university like yours, which has a lot of hands-on, practical, skill-based, experiential learning to be had. But let's just go back to, say, a previous university that you used to work in, or the standard format that we see around the world in these urbanized places. What role do you think technology plays in higher education, apart from going virtual? I mean, what are you seeing and what are you hearing from your peer group?
So I think, we were, many of us, including myself, have been reluctant to, not reluctant, but have thought that the in-person experience is irreplaceable. Yeah. And I would adhere to that. But what we need to define is what part of the in-person experience is indispensable and what part is not. Because for instruction, for instance, we've known for years that virtual can be actually superior to in-person, right? And so accepting that sometimes has been hard, has been tough for many universities around the world. And I think the progress that we've made these past 6 months will push us into separating what's indispensable. A 2-year program may not be 2 year long, because the in-person part, maybe the value of it could be shortened. And with that shortened version, maybe a lower cost, because the cost of higher ed around the world has exploded in the past few decades, and it's high. And so the social cost of it, I think, is on the table as well. So that is one thing. I think the other is that highlights the value of the in-person, right? And so, for instance, one thing we're doing, this is not university, this is high school level vocational training, but we're seeing that if we can develop, and this is an actual project we have with a few other universities, imagine we can produce content for agricultural vocational schools around the world, high school level, right? We can, as experts, provide a lot of sophisticated content, probably more sophisticated than they will get from their own internal faculty. But their internal faculty is crucial, because what these teenage kids or young people need in the world is actually mentoring, getting back to the fields, making agriculture relevant and sexy again, which in the pandemic clearly has become. Now we're clear that we need to eat, right? And we need to eat healthy food, hopefully. So it's a combination. The in-person now, the value of the in-person part, of the mentoring part, of the contact, now becomes more clear. And I think now we need to separate, or not separate, but be clear of the place for each one, and make that into a new model that is hopefully more efficient, but also hopefully more massive, because then we can increase our own reach at Earth and others.
My friend Yusri is asking this question. He's based in the Middle East. And you and I have discussed this as well, actually, which is, given the uniqueness of what you do, have you thought about expanding your model to other parts of the world?
Yes, we have. The question is how, right? So we created something that we're calling Earth Futures, an initiative to further contribute from Earth University with many others. There's nothing we can do alone, right? And one of the pillars, the two pillars of that, is what we call education for leadership. And it is, okay, how can we take what we've learned and learn from others as well, and change the world, especially agriculture, for rural leadership and for agriculture works in the world. And there are several ways. We're working with a network of African universities called Rural Forum for now for 5 years. And so we're already working with them, helping them learn from us, but also us learning from them. I mean, because this is a 2, 4, 10 million way argument. So far only in Africa, usually, but I think we should go all over the world, starting with the tropical belt, right?
Yes.
With, the Middle East, everyone who is in the middle, with different challenges for food production, different ecosystems, but the same challenge of creating the young leadership for this sector.
Great, and there's another question from Jatan Jala in the UK. So how would you ensure you consider learnings from other universities or institutions who give importance to learning with or through nature, who have a unique outlook to nature?
I don't know if I fully get the question. I mean, if what you're saying is how to promote more of this around other universities. We as YGLs, right? We were planning, and it was of course frozen for the year, planning on a special trip to Costa Rica to learn about Costa Rica's decisions as a country. And also we were hosting part of it at Earth University this year with other YGLs from around the world. And the idea was to see how, in this case with agriculture, conservation and the value of biodiversity connects with in this case, agriculture, but all activities, human activities. I think the first point is to make leaders aware. And there are things like the Green Line Expedition and others that help people see the connections to their own doing. Financial markets, different type of industries, all human activity. Again, the role of cities. So I think that's number one. I think we need to make leaders aware first, and then second, we need to put universities together. We launched last year in September at the UN, not at the Assembly, but together with the UN General Assembly, we launched a University Global Coalition. A group of us focused on following or putting the value that universities can create to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. We need to do more of that, and I think that's where the like-minded leaders will come closer, come together, work together, and then start creating a movement of change that will hopefully be irreversible.
Thanks a lot, Arturo. A number of the people that watch this live stream are teachers and educators in the K-12 sector globally, and the question that often I get from schools in particular is, what is the future of the 3 or 4 year bachelor's degree program? given again, yesterday I was reading this article that Google is providing its own certification now, which gives it equal status to a university degree or micro credentials from Cisco or whoever it is. What is your take on this from your perspective?
I think it points to one very important thing that universities sometimes have forgotten, right? Which is it's not only knowledge. Knowledge is useful, but it's really skills that you need. More so today than knowledge, our good friend Jimmy Wales, right? I mean, we have Wikipedia, right? We have literally a global encyclopedia at our palm's reach. So it's not the information. And let me change that. It's not information, but knowledge, which is how I process that. And then skills, which is how I use it. That's what we need to provide. And these micro-certifications actually point to that. It's a list, an inventory of things you know how to do. Now, universities need to go there on one hand. But I do want to say that, for instance, liberal arts education, I think it has a role. But again, it's okay if the mix of skills is diverse. I think that's wonderful. But again, it's a mix of skills, not just I took a class on French literature. That's fine. But it's really what you got out of it, because you could sit through the lectures and then pass an exam. That's one thing. Or you can be more active learner, and the skill being, understanding what the period in that French literature class was about and how does it connect to leadership, to the world at that time, to the world in France or the French-speaking world at that time, or whatever it is. So I think that's number one. And number two, we need to confront the justification of the value we create versus or vis-a-vis the cost that we represent for the world. And I think we need to look at the opportunities to make it both more available and more affordable to more people. And I think corporate universities like Google or others, I think it will help in this process. I think universities are more relevant than ever, but we do need to evolve and reinvent ourselves.
Given farming and agriculture are such old and traditional sectors that have existed forever, what's the return on investment of coming to Earth University?
It's interesting because donors, for instance, ask us for that, right? And it depends on how you measure. And the first distinction is measuring the student and their impact. And these are different measures. So when they ask me, I was, as you know, in a business school before. It was easier to measure because in general, they would go to the private sector or they would start a company. And in the end, the measure was, how much were you making after the MBA and how much were you making before? But with agents of change, I was talking to an Ecuadorian graduate the other day, and he started these green awards, and now he's convening hundreds of incredible projects from all across Latin America, connecting them to the World Bank, connecting them to the Inter-American Development Bank and other funders, et cetera, et cetera. So if we measure what he makes as opposed to what he would have made in a different university program, that's one measure that probably won't tell you much. But if you measure the impact he's having, the thousands of people he's impacting every year with the way he's connecting these projects and bringing them to funders and helping them be more solid, that's a different measure of that. And that's ours, because our mission is to provoke and create change through our graduates. And they're doing it. And so we need to measure that. And we struggle with that a little bit, obviously, right? And it's qualitative at times, but you can see it, both anecdotally and with some aggregate data. And so you can see it, and that's what you need to put on the other side of the ballot, right? That said, even Earth needs to also address the issue of, okay, can we do more? Can we do more with less? And can we do that for more people? And the answer is yes in all fronts. And we're working on that, on reinvention. And what you mentioned about virtual, that's a great way to scale up. Not every farmer needs to be an agronomic engineer. Every farmer needs information. Every farmer needs weather instructions, ecosystem instructions on how to manage the right crops in their fields. And so that's a potential that 10 years ago was not here for us or for anyone. And I think that's a potential for scaling our impact and to have a better sense of it.
I think my friend Yusri is trying to needle us a little bit, and I know he's watching, because the thing that he doesn't say is that he works at a university in the Middle East. But he asks, what are the possibilities technology-wise when using online teaching platforms to guarantee the same quality of teaching in your curriculum that is mainly based on field and immersive experience in nature?
That's a wonderful question, Yusri. So there are parts of the experience that can just not be replaced by virtual means, right? Milking a cow, again, you need to do it. Flying a plane, swimming, riding a bicycle, right? But it can support it, and that's the beauty of it. First of all, for the material, the content of any given class as they go into the field, having the whole content in their palms, let's say with a mobile-based learning platform, virtual learning platform, it's priceless instead of carrying books or the laptops. And so that's one. But the second is, let me give you an example. One of the courses we're moving into this mobile platform is tropical forestry. And so what the professor is doing is not only teaching, but sending the students into the field, asking them to identify not only species, but either fungi or this disease or whatever. And everyone was taking pictures and sharing with the class. And that kind of learning process facilitated by virtual means was not happening before. And it would be very hard and expensive to make it happen in a non-virtual, because it would mean go out and take hundreds of pictures and put them up there in a board. And, I don't know. It's no way to replicate. So I think the virtual means actually can support, if you structure with that goal in mind, the experiential learning, and would not replace fully, but clearly improve the instructional part, the lecturing part, or the information transfer part, really, right? Where, the best, I was a professor, and I know there were better lecturers than me. And so if what I want is my students to grow, I don't care if there is another professor who does a better, job at lecturing on something. Listen to him or her. And let's keep talking about how are we going to use this knowledge into your work, into your leadership, into your impact.
Well, Arturo, thank you so much for your time today. I want to conclude this conversation not because of anything else, but I'm respectful of your time, and I know there'll be another opportunity to speak like this. But if there was a message that was that you wanted to give those that are watching this about your hopes for the future, how would you articulate that hope for the future?
Well, I think let me frame it around the pandemic, right? I think the pandemic has brought the best, and also in some cases the worst of us. From teachers and educators, K-12, higher ed, it has shown their true call. I seen my faculty, rise up to the challenge, and they've done a great job. Incomplete, of course, we were not ready, right? But a great job. And I know K-12 teachers are doing it all around the world. I see it with my own kids, right? And they're fortunate enough to have, a great school. And so the first message is, let's harness that power, because that's not, for us educators, it's not just a job. It's really a call in life. And so that's number one. And number two, the call is really to transform the life of others. And I think we need to realign institutional frameworks like universities to that call. What was the goal at the beginning, to begin with? And for universities, it's research, but it's also the education of these young leaders. And so the message is, let's take this opportunity to see again, what's the essentials of our day-to-day experience, but also the essential of our mission and our big goal as institutions, because that's where the future, I think, lies.
On that note, Arturo, thank you so much for joining this live stream. If people wanted to keep in touch with you and your work, where do they go online?
So our website is relatively easy. It's earth.ac.cr. AC for academic, .cr for Costa Rica. And my email is there. I love to continue with some of the chats. I love the questions. I see questions we couldn't answer, but I love to continue the conversation. And I would invite them to look at University Global Coalition as well for those in higher ed, because I think it's a time to get together and work together more closely.
And where do they get information on that?
You follow universityglobalcoalition.org. Just all in a single word.
Wonderful, and thank you once again, Arturo.
Thank you, Vikas. It was wonderful to be here.